From the studios of Cue Ball Media in New York, this is the Create Your New Normal podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Quinones, and every other Wednesday, I'll interview people who have successfully reinvented themselves. We'll look at the challenges and obstacles they overcame to create their new normal. They'll talk about how they did it, and hopefully it will inspire you to do the same. So are you ready to create your new normal? Well, let's get it. This is the Create Your New Normal podcast, episode number 2. And I'm going to introduce to you my guest. My guest is the president and founder of Standby Media, LLC, which specializes in sports media production, sports audio production, broadcast consulting, and on-air talent development and coaching for play-by-play announcers and game analysts. He is also the director of the Hall of Excellence, a world-class memorabilia museum at Fontainebleau, Las Vegas, created in partnership with 7-time Super Bowl champ Tom Brady and sportscasting legend Jim Gray. He oversees all operations for the museum, including strategic planning, staff leadership, curation, and event execution, working closely with sales, marketing, and public relations teams to create an unrivaled guest experience. He is the former executive vice president and executive producer at Westwood One Sports, where he was responsible for the coordination and execution of the on-air and remote production for all sports programming, including live national radio play-by-play broadcasts of major sporting events. And during his 35-year tenure at the network, he produced more than 1,000 NFL game broadcasts and produced more Super Bowl broadcasts than anyone else in NFL history. Okay, that's a great stat. And he's done a lot of other things. We'll run out of time if we go through all of them.
I was going to say, the podcast is over now. Thank you for that long introduction. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
You can look me up.
But we'll talk about the other things that he's done. But one thing I want to mention is that his greatest accomplishment, deep down he knows this, is that he talked with me about sports every day before first period in high school. And so I introduce you to my guest today, Howard Deneroff. Howard, how you doing?
Hello, Anthony. It's been a long time since those lunchroom tables, which actually were like breakfast tables for us before first period, going over the news of the night before. And for our younger audience, we didn't have the internet. We didn't know what happened on the West Coast when we got to school in the morning because it didn't make it in time into the newspapers, if you even know what newspapers are. So we used to talk 2 days later about things because we had no idea what happened with the Dodgers, the Giants, the Mariners, etc.
Yeah, remember those Yankee Mariner games? You didn't know what happened until maybe the day after.
Right.
Yeah, and it's funny you mention that because we're getting old. And the reason why I said it, I was thinking the other day, it's like, man, we talk so much about, sports talk today, WFAN and all the, ESPN radio and all these other stations. The sports talk format as we know it didn't exist when we were in high school.
No, FAN started 2 years later, summer of '87, when I was in college. I went to school for broadcasting. So that was a huge event that certainly helped shape my career later. Not that I went into sports talk, but all of a sudden there was a 24/7 sports outlet in New York City that needed programming. And when I got out of college, I started producing sporting broadcasts on the radio that WFAN in New York aired and other stations around the country. Oh, yeah. And that was the genesis, and it created a whole lot of jobs for us sports fans that wanted to get into broadcasting.
Yeah, so we were pretty much sports talk before sports talk, right? I mean, we
would argue
riveting
just like
discussions every
Mike
day.
is sitting at those tables. Not just with you, but I don't know if you remember a guy named Frank Sibilia.
Yeah,
And Frank's a guy, and he was a big Ron Guidry fan, and I was a huge Jack Morris fan. And we would argue who was the better starting pitcher. And Guidry was better up until our high school years, and then Morris proved to be much better overall. Not much better. Guidry was a great pitcher, but Morris had a better finish of his career and longevity, and won World Series, obviously, and pitched a no-hitter and stuff. But those were great arguments.
Oh, yeah, and Guidry was great for like a 3-4 year period. But yeah, Jack Morris definitely had the longevity and a big game pitcher. He won a lot of big games for the Tigers over the years.
Yeah, but Guidry's year in '78 was the best since the 70s, probably, of any pitcher.
Yeah.
If you look at it, just total dominance. And
25 and
it
3.
was a fun argument regardless. And there was no right answer at the time, right? But it was just
Yeah.
good, like friends do. You just, it's just one of those things. That was just one of the arguments I remember that we went back and forth a lot, depending on who did what that night,
Yeah,
But,
and then the Mets and the Yankees, the Yankees were by far the better team when we started. And then later on, the Mets got Strawberry, then they got Doc, and then Davey Johnson came up for the minors to manage them. And then, the scale shifted. It went from here to there, and the Mets were good for, the rest of our time in high school and then for
yeah,
a few years afterwards.
our freshman year, sophomore year of colleges, that's when the Mets, were pennant contending and winning the World Series. So, but yes. And then the Yankees went down a little bit and whatever. But it's good times. It was good.
Yeah. Yep. So we had 4 years of that, and then we went our separate ways. I went to the University of Florida. And just for you guys that watching and listening to this, I want to alert you that the University of Florida is now a basketball school, not a football school. Okay, for those of you who haven't figured that out over the last few years. But I went to Florida, and you went to Syracuse, and then upon graduating, 4 years later, you started a long and illustrious career at CBS Sports. And we know CBS Sports, the name and company, has changed a couple of times over the years, but that's where you started.
To be fair, the radio division, but it was in the CBS broadcast center, same building as the TV comes out of. But yes, so we were there and doing all the same events you would see on television on CBS, the Masters, the NCAA tournament, the NFL, et cetera, et cetera. And back in the 90s, CBS had the rights to all the Winter Olympics, so we did those as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you get started at CBS Sports?
So I went to college I went there to be the next Marv Albert. That was my goal. But that, as when I went up to Syracuse, because, growing up in New York in the 80s, Marv did, he did the NFL on NBC. He did the Rangers and the Knicks locally. He did the evening news on NBC, 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock.
Right.
He filled in on some Major League Baseball games. So he was everywhere. He was the number one guy, and went to Syracuse, as did Bob Costas, as did Len Berman, who also worked in New York, and several others. And so myself and many other students, wannabe sportscasters, ended up there, including Mike Tirico, by the way, including Ian Eagle, by the way, including Craig Carton, all three names that people in New York should be very familiar with. And we all wanted to be Marv. That was it. Now, obviously, I did not become Marv. I could argue that Tirico and Ian and Craig have all made their way, and among others, to that. But I decided when I was up in college that I thought behind the scenes was better for me. So I learned how to produce. I learned how to direct. I learned how to do all those things. And fortuitously, about 10 days before I was graduating, a former Syracuse student posted the job listing at CBS Radio to become I think it was called a production assistant or something along those lines, desk assistant, production assistant within the sports division on radio, and started immediately. They had just acquired the rights to Major League Baseball and the NFL in Spanish, and they needed somebody to work on those broadcasts who was, if not fluent, proficient enough to be able to produce a broadcast in Spanish, which I was, and had to know baseball, had to know football, and had to know how to, edit and do interviews and all the other stuff. So I interviewed for the job about a week before I graduated, started 2 days after I graduated on a Sunday, drove on a Monday from Syracuse to New York City, threw my stuff in my father's apartment, started the next day, and didn't leave the company for 35 years to the day. Started on May 16th, 1989. Now it became Westwood One. It was, owned by Infinity. It was owned by Westinghouse. And then it was short time, it was Dial Global. And then it was owned by Cumulus for the last however many years. And there's a couple others in the middle. But in essence, it was the same place that I started. And we just kept adding the rights to different events. And I stuck around to be part of sports history, if you will, from behind the scenes perspective, and had a great time doing it for so long.
Wow, an amazing 35-year run. Not too many people get to say that nowadays, working at a place for that long.
Yeah, very fortunate. Most people don't even get to say they love their job for 35 days, 35 months, 35 weeks, any of those. I I know it. It was, look, a lot of hard work goes into it. It's not like, you win the lottery. You have to be able to perform and all the other stuff and get the job.
Hmm.
That being said, I never really felt like I was, you know, it wasn't like I was upset going to work, right? Work
Yeah.
for me was pleasure. Because most people, what do they do when they're not working if you're a sports fan? You
Yeah.
watch a game, you go to a
Right.
game, you listen to a game, you read about the game, and so to me it was the best of it could possibly be. And my goal was to go to as many sporting events as I could for free. That was the
Hmm.
whole goal in all of
Uh-huh.
that. And succeeded pretty well at it, luckily.
Yeah, that's great that you were blessed to do that. And at the end, you were the executive vice president, the executive producer at Westwood One Sports, and you talked about the
Yes.
iteration of the company, how names and owners changed over
Ownership.
the year. Um, why don't you tell our audience your trajectory from production assistant, quickly, because I know you did a lot, in that
Yeah.
time, but your trajectory from production assistant to executive vice president, executive producer for all these different events that I mentioned and that you've also
Yeah.
mentioned.
So parted ways with Westwood One 2 years ago, this week, in May 1st, basically, and was the executive producer since August of 2008. Before that was the coordinating producer. But from the time the production assistant, I started, I was working, like I said, the Spanish broadcasts. I was doing stuff on operations. I did work a little bit of news. And then I switched to the English side because the Spanish language network disappeared after a few years. So I switched over to the English side and, worked my way up to producing game broadcasts. First in the studio, doing like pre, half, and post, and handling all the elements, whether it's highlights and interviews and stuff from the studio. And then worked my way up to becoming a road producer and being on site at the games and
Hmm.
and doing all that for all different sports. Again, we had the rights to Major League Baseball my first 12 years. We had the rights to the Olympics in the 90s. We had the Masters. We had the NFL all along. We had college football. We had, so there was a lot of great events. We had Wimbledon tennis and U.S. Open tennis, and then eventually we added later on. We added the Triple Crown of horse racing. We added the NHL for many years, and we
Hmm.
added, all these. And then we added the Olympics through NBC. We became their radio partner for that under the Westwood umbrella, not under the CBS umbrella, obviously. And so,
Hmm.
so just kept kind of plugging away and doing the producing, and then slowly working my way up to the part where I would be in charge of the production of all the games, and then I would be in charge of the talent, and then I hiring the announcers and all that. And so then I became involved doing the negotiations for the rights, the broadcast rights, so we could keep doing the broadcast. For most of the early part of my career, the whole early part, and then up until 2008, I had to rely on others to retain the broadcast rights. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had broadcast to produce, right, and work on.
Right.
And then the last however many years, I guess 17, I was in charge of handling most of those negotiations, or certainly involved in them. I wasn't solo. There was other people involved, whether it was the CEOs or the head salesperson and legal and everything else. But from the sports perspective, at least I was able to have a say in what we kept, what we went after, what we acquired, and so it was kind of I'm not gonna say a slow rise, because nothing. I had this conversation with somebody the other day. Nothing ever goes as fast as you want it to, and that's not a
Right.
complaint, right? It's just like a baseball player, right? You get drafted, or a football player, you want to start right away. You want to win a Super Bowl. You don't want to go to single A, double A, triple A. You want to go right to the majors, right? And
Right.
sometimes it may take you 3 years, or it might take you a year and a half, and you still think that's too long.
Hmm.
And so while you're going through it, it seems slow and like, oh, how am I gonna? I want to do this, I want to do that, right? But the truth is, I always loved it. I never really looked for another job. I
Hmm.
mean, there was one week in 98, 98, we lost the rights to Major League Baseball, to ESPN Radio, which wasn't around when I first started, and then became an entity, and they required
Hmm.
those rights. And so I applied to go to ESPN Radio for that because I loved baseball, and that's what I had done for most of those first 10 years. And so I applied, didn't get the position. which turned out to be better for me because I ended up sliding over to becoming the top NFL guy, producing games on site, and then stayed there. And we kept adding games. The NFL kept expanding the schedule. Right when I first started, the NFL national schedule, the primetime schedule was 16 Monday night games,
Yep.
2 Thanksgiving games, and 2 Saturday games late in December rather, and
Right.
then the playoffs. But the playoffs didn't have 4 wild cards. Now they have 6. Didn't have
Yeah.
4 wild card games. Didn't have, it was minimal. It was 30 games that we
Yeah.
did. And now when I left, we were doing 85 primetime games.
Yeah, you got Thursday night, and then yeah.
The Thursday night, extra Mondays. You got a full Sunday boat. There was no Sunday night football back then when I
Right.
first started.
Mm-hmm.
They did a couple Thursday night games. They did a couple Sunday night because ESPN, you remember, had Sunday night baseball
Right.
through September, whatever. So Turner did some games, and then when the baseball strike happened in '94, that changed it, and all of a sudden ESPN and us on radio ended up doing Sunday night football to fill the gap in September and October, and we never kind of looked back after that. And so anyway, the point is, the growth of the NFL ended up being a huge part of my growth, and so it's just one of those things, and always loved doing it, and being in Green Bay in sub-zero temperatures never really truly bothered me. And all
Yeah.
my friends who are watching this podcast are calling me a liar right now. But the truth is, if I didn't like being there necessarily the day before, the day after the game, but game
Right.
time, I loved it.
Yeah, it's it's the elements. I mean, it doesn't really matter when you're at a game. You don't really feel it as much because the enjoyment of the game, outweighs the weather. And it's funny, the more we talk, the more we date ourselves because a lot of these things that we enjoy now, like you said, we didn't have all these games all the time. It was, and then, when we were very, very young, we only had 3 networks, ABC, CBS, and, we start
Right.
talking
And
like
the
old
radio,
people.
and
Yeah,
not to
and
cut you
radio.
off, Anthony, but the radio, in order to hear radio, if you wanted to listen to Monday Night Football on the radio, let's just say,
Yeah.
or the World Series, you'd have to find the station in
Uh-huh.
whatever city you're in. And then if you
Losing
started
me there.
driving, like if you were driving hypothetically from
Yeah.
New York to Boston or New York to Washington, D.C., you'd have to find the news station every 100 miles or so. You get to Philly, you have
Yeah.
to find a different station because one would fade away. And
Yeah.
then the next one or whatever. Nowadays, it's really more audio than radio because you can get it on your phone. You can get it on, on an app. You can get it on the internet. You can get it almost anywhere. And you don't have to worry about changing the channel, right? So to speak,
Yeah.
or the station. So it's so much easier, and everything is at our fingertips. And
Right.
and that's, like I said, and the immediacy and the need for immediacy by the fans is what helped fuel the growth of sports broadcasting. And I was just a beneficiary of the right place, right time. And so was anybody who was my age, basically entering the field, because the explosion I mentioned of sports radio stations, but then then ESPN started getting successful. More, the first couple of years they were not.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they added an ESPN2 and an ESPN3, and then satellite TV came into play. And all of a sudden there were hundreds and hundreds of sports jobs available for all us sports nerds that wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, I should have jumped in at that time.
Sorry, you didn't get my message?
And it's funny you talked about the radio because that's where I found out that you were at Westwood One because, you listen to a game and they'd say, the final score is the Jets 24, Patriots 17. And then they talk about, Monday Night Football on Westwood One and the executive producer is Howard Deneroff. And I heard your name a couple of times and I'm like, is that the guy I went to school with? Because, we talk sports all the time, so this would be a perfect job for you. And lo and behold, I found out that it was you. So, it's funny
Luckily,
how...
my name isn't so common. If my name was Mike Smith, you wouldn't have known if it was the right Mike Smith. But in this case,
Yeah.
I'm the only one there. And thank you for being the only one other than my mom to listen to the credits at the end. And obviously, when you said the Jets beat the Patriots in your example, that was before Tom Brady came along to the Patriots, apparently, because I don't think they ever beat him after that. Certainly not on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I just made up a score.
I know you did. I'm just teasing. I'm teasing you, though.
You don't hear that score too often, but I know what you mean.
I'm teasing the Jet fans.
Yeah.
And giving Tom some props since I'm working at his museum and Jim Gray's museum now in Las Vegas. So
Yeah, definitely. So you had a long career. You did all those things at all those different events for 35 years at CBS Sports, Westwood One. And then what happened?
Well, much like a player an athlete in any sport, I was under contract for
Mm-hmm.
many years. I was full time. I was under contract though, and sometimes I would have a 2 year deal. Sometimes I'd have a 3 year deal. Occasionally, I'd have a 5 year contract. Depending. No different than an athlete. And when my contract was up, I would usually renegotiate a deal. And when my contract was up in 2024, I wanted to, re-up my deal. They did not. And so that was the end of my career at Westwood One. And so having hired announcers and signed contracts with hundreds of announcers over the years and with leagues and teams and conferences, to do broadcasts, it's part of the business. It doesn't make it feel any better when it happens to you. But, I loved every minute of it and no regrets. And that's a business decision that was theirs. Didn't come to an agreement to extend. And that's, it's the way it works, right? So I got calls from a lot of the players who worked with me and for me. They said, "Now you know what it feels like to be cut from a roster." And I was like, "Now you're truly one of us." And I was like,
Oh man.
"Thanks." And so, look, I still have a lot of friends that work there, a lot of people who, spend a lot of hours working hard and putting out great product. And, I wish them well, but I'm not going to lie. I miss the red light going on and the adrenaline of a live broadcast. Because while I love what I'm doing since, with the other two things you mentioned at the top, the Standby Media and the Hall of Excellence, it's not the same as being live during a broadcast. It's not. And so it's much probably the same thing that a player goes through, right? When they leave the field and they
Yeah.
retire. Even though I didn't retire, it's, they leave the field, like, what do they do to fill the void? Well, some of them
Yeah.
go into broadcasting, which is good for me because I'm helping coach them now. And the other ones go into coaching, right? Or they try and go into coaching to try and replicate that adrenaline rush of Sunday game day or Monday night or whatever. And so, so there's nothing, no great secret, no great, whatever, but all good things come to an end, as they say. And so now it's on to the next chapter or next two chapters, as the case may be.
Yeah, well, as a fellow sports fan, I enjoy watching sports and as well as you do. But thank you for all the work that you've done over the years to make my life enjoyable because,
Thank you for listening.
doing that. I mean, I know it's fun. I know you enjoy it, but it is a lot of hard work to make a telecast pop, make it entertaining, and we enjoy the fruits of it. But thank you for all that you have done with
You're
that.
welcome. And, I joke about you being the only one who heard my name other than my mom. I know that's not true, but, sometimes people, don't think that unless you're in your car back in the day, you wouldn't have the radio on. Now, if you lived in New York, a lot of times you'd have it on because you're sitting in traffic at the
Yeah.
Lincoln Tunnel, for
Or the
example.
GW.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. One of those, right? And so, but we had a huge audience. When we would do a Super Bowl, sometimes those numbers were in the 20 to 25 million people, and Super Bowl on TV gets 100 million people, and so there are a lot of people out there that relied on the radio when they were not able to get in front of a television, and or some people just preferred the announcers better, or some people were didn't have sight, or whatever, or at work right before you could watch TV at work or whatever. So whatever the reason, we did have a very loyal audience and a great audience, and it was I always produced a game broadcast as if I was the listener. I always
Hmm.
felt I was the target audience. If I wasn't working a game, like when ESPN, I mentioned, took the baseball rights for us, they also had the NBA rights. So if I wanted to hear the NBA finals on radio or World Series after, I stopped doing it, I would listen all the time because I was that audience, right? So when I would produce as if, what would I want to hear?
Hmm.
Because I felt that's what you would want to hear, Anthony, right? Or anybody
Yeah.
else. But
Sure.
I had to think about it. What is the age group of who we're listening to? What are the demographics? We'd get reports of that, and so you'd have to change things a little bit here and there. But for the most
Hmm.
part, if you're listening to a Jacksonville, Tennessee game on Thursday Night Football on WFAN in New York or WEEI in Boston or whatever it was, you're a football fan, right? You are a
Yeah.
diehard football fan. You're not casually you're not,
Yeah.
oh, it's on, I'll leave it on. That doesn't happen when you're in the car, right? So,
Yeah.
so anyways, it was a great pleasure doing it. I got to be at so many historical events, so many great events that, sometimes I have to look back. Wait, I was there. Somebody starts talking about something. I was like, yeah, do you remember? I was like, yeah, I was there. It was great. It's a lot of wonderful, wonderful, wonderful memories. Um, you know, and so very fortunate and thankful to all the people who helped put me in that position. And so now on to the next kind of the next chapter. But yeah, I think the passion I had for sports in high
Sure.
school
Yeah.
served me well in this, because I don't think I would have been successful. The truth is, I don't think anybody is successful at what they do if they don't love what they do. I
Yeah.
just think that it becomes a job and not a career kind of thing. But that's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, you got to have that passion, and definitely for a Jacksonville, Tennessee game,
Yeah,
you have
right.
to work hard to make it entertaining.
Just an example. Yeah, there was a
Yeah,
time when Jacksonville and Tennessee were both good, and they went to the AFC Championship game
yeah,
in '99, actually, the '99
yeah.
season, and
That's a
Tennessee
while.
almost beat the Rams for the Super Bowl title. But anyway,
Yeah. So you talked about filling voids, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. So, but these things hit everybody differently. Now, there are a
yeah,
few people who lose their jobs, they get a little bit of severance, and they're fine because maybe they don't want to be at their job. But for most of us, whether we know it's coming, we don't know it's coming, no matter how long we've worked at a place, it usually hurts. But the hurt is different for everybody.
yeah,
Now, you were a 35-year vet at this company, and obviously you did a great job. You have proof of concept, right? You went from here to here to here, and I mean, this
yeah.
title of executive vice president, executive producer, the man who has produced more Super Bowls than anybody. I mean, great stat to have in your back pocket. Networking
I should
events.
give me a moment just to clarify that for your audience.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean I was better than some of the legendary TV producers who produced the Super Bowl over the years.
yeah,
But what it means was, like, if you obviously, maybe not obviously for some, but the Super Bowl rotates on television every year.
yeah,
And so, even if you're the A crew on TV and you get to do it every third year, right? And you're there for 30 years, you're only getting 10 Super Bowls,
right.
or maybe you're getting 12 depending on the rotation and what year you started. And so it's nothing more than CBS Radio and Westwood had the rights all 35 years I was there.
Yeah,
And so while I was not the lead producer when I first started, right? And I was, but I was by the time I left, and I was executive producer, just being there for, even 20 is more than anybody on television had accomplished. And again, that's not just so it's a great stat, but it's also, kind of right place, right time thing.
yeah,
Just I'm very proud of it, but no slight, I don't consider myself in the category of some of the legendary TV producers who've, it's a much, much different kind of broadcast and hard broadcast. Not that ours was easy by any
yeah,
stretch. But I want to, make
yeah.
that clear. But it hurt. If that's where you're going, it did hurt. Still
Yeah.
hurts.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that you're not going to brag about yourself, but I mean, I know a lot of people have bragged about you because, I was reading articles about how your contract was not renewed, and just an outpouring of praise from guys like, Boomer and Tim Brando and many others, just about how you've helped their careers, the type of work that you did. So, you're not going to brag about yourself, but I will. Other people will, and that's the way it's supposed to be anyway. I mean, it's great that you display this humility, but you've done a lot. You did a lot in 35 years, okay? And as you say that it hurt. Now, like I said, it hurts to everybody differently. How did it hurt you being with the same company again with the proof of concept for 35 years? Probably pretty close to retirement, right? And then not having your contract renewed. What kind of hurt did you go through?
Um, it was, I mean, I've said this to other people who asked, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was devastating. And not because of the job itself, not because of the job title, not because I was there for 35 years, because I was no longer able to do what I loved, producing live game broadcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was a way to work out that, hey, would you still just produce Monday Night Football and strip yourself of the title and even full-time status and everything else, I would have jumped at it, just because to me that is, over the years, when I kept getting promoted, that was where I felt I was strongest, was the live situations, being able to produce, a live broadcast that was enjoyable, informative, engaging, and everything for everybody else. And the other thing I would say I was probably best at is recognizing on-air talent, and cultivating on-air talent. So those two things, are only a small fraction of my executive producer job. In fact, many executive producers never are live game producing. I didn't have to. I could have assigned other people to do it. I didn't, because it was my favorite part of the job and the part that I thought I did best. There are people who can negotiate contracts better than me. Absolutely. There are people who might be better in a room going over budgets than me, right? I mean, I was good with numbers, as you know, because we went to the same high school. But so that was helpful. But I tried to use those numbers more for batting averages and touchdown passes and stuff like that, and free throw percentage, than I did for for budgets. So I mean, I had to do all of that, and I didn't dislike any of the other stuff. But to me, from kickoff till the final gun hit zero, or whatever, until overtime in hockey, whatever it was, even if it was like quadruple overtime in the playoffs, that was when I was in my happy place. And so the fact that happy place, for whatever reason, was taken away from me. And again, I understand it's a business decision. I made a lot of those decisions myself for years. That's what hurt to me, because I could no longer do that. Now, I also felt that, okay, it's just a matter of time and I'll get back in the booth for somebody else doing that. And so, that hasn't happened yet on the radio, but I'm still young. Hopefully it will happen one day, because I feel I have a lot to offer for it. And it doesn't have to be the World Series. It doesn't have to be March Madness, which I handled for 20 some odd years. It doesn't have to be those, but I'm happy doing a Division II game in Central Iowa or something. To me, it's the thrill of the live. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what you're going to see. No two games are alike. In any, 1,000 NFL games you mentioned, no two of them are alike. No two. And if you pick one game that I was at along the years, I could tell you something unique about that game, probably. Maybe not off the top of my head for all of them, but if you threw a date at me and a team, I'd say, oh yeah, that was the day that blah, blah, blah happened. Or that was because that's why we watch. Yeah. That's why we listen. That's why we care. I mean, there's 150 years in baseball history, and all of a sudden Shohei Ohtani comes out and he's a unicorn, right? No matter what we saw for the first 140 whatever years before he stepped to the plate his first time or stepped to the mound, we've never seen him before. No. And every time he does something, it's a new thing. And he's not the only one. Look, it could just be anything, right? 2 years ago, you had the first walk-off grand slam in a World Series game in history. The World Series started in 1903, right? Then you had the 18-inning game this past year. He got on base 9 times. So the walk-off, by the way, is Freddie Freeman, not Shohei, to confuse people. But my point is, and then he got on base 9 straight times in the 18-inning game. Yeah,
exactly,
which tied the record for the longest game. So every game is so different, and you never know what to expect. And that's why, at least that's why I think we love sports. Yeah. And there's also great stories, about the people themselves and all of that. But so that's what I miss the most. And it hurt then, it hurts now. But it's not like I'm sitting at home crying. It's not like I'm, it's not like I'm sitting there in the dark and having a funeral. Although I will say, for the first 30 to 60 days afterwards, I did not feel like doing much of anything. I was just like, I was sitting there reflecting. A lot of people were reaching out, via text or calling or tweeting or maybe posting if it was X by then. I don't remember when they switched over from Twitter, but whatever. So it was that was the first 60 days, 30 to 60 was the hardest. But a lot of people reached out with encouragement and suggested I, go into broadcast coaching and consulting and things of that nature. And it's what I know best. And it's what I've done best. So I started that, and that kind of got me back into it a little bit. I've been doing some part-time work for the NFL, and CBS Television Sports was kind enough to hire me to do some part-time work just to kind of, so it gets my juices going a little bit, and it keeps me from sitting around too long without doing anything. And then the Hall of Excellence Museum came along, and that's a full-time gig, directing that, and it's a wonderful place. And as I say to everybody, as a producer, you're really a storyteller. That's what you're doing. You're storytelling with the help of the announcers, clearly, and pictures if you're on television, and sound if you're on radio. You're telling the story of what's happening in that game and the athletes that are involved. Well, this museum we have, I'm telling the story of these great athletes that are worthy of being in the Hall of Excellence, and those moments that either made them excellence or people remember them for their excellence. And so the only difference is those stories are not being told on the radio, they're being told in the museum.
Right.
And so it's very similar in that respect. Like I said, the difference is it's just not going on around the country and 25 million people can't hear me at once, or hear what I'm producing at once.
Yeah, so that is a big difference.
And I still get to tell people about Babe Ruth's called shot home run in the 1932 World Series because we have that bat. And I get to tell people about all 7 of Tom Brady's Super Bowl rings because we have that in the museum. And I get to tell them about Billie Jean King, and I get to tell them about Don Shula and Kobe and Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game and all things that we have artifacts for. And you name it, we have over 300 items, all different sports. And so it's great. And the best part is, like, I was at a lot of those events. I wasn't at Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. That was 1962. But
yeah. Did that really happen?
Yes,
No.
It did. We have the radio broadcast of it, actually. There was no television broadcast.
People make jokes about that. Like, the young people are like, like when Bam got his 83, it's like, yeah, I saw that, but Wilt's didn't happen. I mean, did that really happen? But yeah, it did happen, yeah.
So, yeah, it was not on television. The game was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. There were 4,162 people, but don't hold me to the fire.
50,000 people admit that they were there, but yeah, there was only about 4,000.
The game was broadcast on the radio, and there is a radio call of it. And I have that broadcast, and I have that call, and it exists. And by the way, for those of you, the game never finished. He scored his 100th point with, I think, 48 seconds left, and they stopped the game because all 4,000 fans rushed the court. And so they never finished it. So he might have ended up with 102 or 103 or whatever. But prior to Bam, he held the record for most free throws in a game with hitting 28 of 32, which was incredible for a lifetime 51% free throw shooter.
So in the words of the great Johnny Carson, I did not know that.
Well, see, that's my job, to tell the story and make it more interesting, right? Yeah. That's what we do. Why should you care? I'll tell you why you should care.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so if you go there and you see the scorecard that's there and the program and the ticket stub, and you see that Wilt Chamberlain assigned it, and we give you an audio device and you hold it over the artifact, you get to hear the call of him scoring 100 points, and you get a story explaining the whole night and everything else, voiced by Marv Albert, actually. Speaking of Marv Albert that we talked about earlier, and Bob Costas voices some other items, and Jim Nance voices others, and Doc Emmerich and Jim Gray, who had about 40% of this museum in his house before we opened. Oh. So it's great if you love sports, just because you get to hear sports announcers telling you about it.
Yeah, great stuff. This is the Create Your New Normal podcast. Anthony Quinones is your host, and the director of the Hall of Excellence, Howard Deneroff, is my guest. So we've covered a lot. Thank you for all that you've shared so far, just about sports in your life. Now, let's talk about, we'll talk about reinvention. That's what this show is really all about. It's about reinvention. And going back to where you were a couple of years ago. Now, I'm not going to tell your age, but if, we could probably figure it out if you're good in math. Many of us were watching.
You're only as old as you feel.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was told.
Yeah, that's what we were told, yeah. Until you wake up in the morning. But anyway, many of us are at that vulnerable age. Many of us who are watching, listening are at that age. We're like 47, 50, 52, 57. And so at that age, we're too young to retire.
Yep.
But we're also too expensive to get back in where we were. So if we lose our job, many times we have to take a step back. And throughout that process, we go through a lot of emotions. We go through a lot of things. Now, I know you talked about, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I remember, you talked about how this hit you really hard for the first 30 to 60 days.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Again, you have a great resume, okay? And I know you're not going to say I'm the greatest, I'm this or that, but there are a lot of things on there that show that you are one of the best at what you do. And deep down, you're probably one of the best at what you do, right? Now, leaving this position, Did you think that you would get something really fast because of your amount of experience and the amount of accolades that you've acquired over the years?
I didn't think I would get. See, radio is not like television, and not because obviously just that's a dumb statement, but not. And I don't mean that because of there's no pictures and all that. Obviously, it's not like television, but it's not like television. The fact that there aren't a bunch of television networks broadcasting sporting events that I could easily jump to.
Mm-hmm.
There's ESPN Radio that does the NBA and the World Series and has Major League Baseball and that, and those are the extent of the play-by-play they do, and they also have sports talk. I never worked sports talk. Doesn't mean I can't do it, but I never did. And then SiriusXM obviously doesn't. They carry all these play-by-play broadcasts, but they don't really produce the broadcast. They take the feed from whomever and they put it on their channel. So that's very different. And then there are the local teams that do their broadcast. So there's really one or two other jobs out there that I could have gotten that would be similar to what I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't think ESPN was going to say, hey, he's available. We should replace the guy we have that's his equivalent and bring him in. Never thought that, right? I understand that. That's their guy, just like I was the Westwood guy. So, but what I did think was that somebody would find something or call me with something. Because, like I said, when you produce that many broadcasts, and that not just the NFL, I mean, I worked the Stanley Cup playoffs for 19 years, and I said they ran the tournament coverage from 03 to 24, and did stuff before that too, which wasn't in charge of it. You figure that you can help somebody along the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think what happens, to your point, is I think that people assume that you're too expensive.
Yeah.
And look, there's no doubt if somebody said to me, would you come produce this game in Fargo, North Dakota for $100? I'm going to say no, and no offense to Fargo. It's a lovely place.
Mm-hmm.
It could be in Philadelphia. Am I going to do it for $100? Yes. If I didn't need the money, I would go do it for $100, right? If it didn't keep me from making money elsewhere. Because I said to you, I love being at the game. So I would do it,
yeah.
Right? But I think people assume I might not. Now, I'm not working for $100. Anybody who's watching, listening, wants to hire me. I'm not working for $100. But
yeah, we're going to put that right out.
I'm not expecting thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, because I just, like I said, I whatever you're paying somebody else to do the job, right? I understand that. I understand everybody has budgets. I just enjoy doing the games and stuff. So they never talked to me. And I have a number, obviously, that I would work and not work, and everybody does. But that was never, nobody approached me with that, and that surprised me. That would see what I would be surprised about. Now, several people called me immediately and said, hey, if you want to pivot, I got 2 calls from broadcast agents who represent announcers if I was interested in maybe becoming an agent, that they thought I could be good at that, representing those guys to get them placed on networks and stuff. And I told them, I have enough trouble worrying about my own job. I don't want to worry about getting jobs for everybody else, but I would consider it if I changed my mind, whatever. And I did get, like I said, the NFL was kind enough to call me and give me some part-time work on game day Sundays and CBS. And so I picked up a couple freelance things here and there. It doesn't mean like nobody talked to me,
right.
But I thought there would be faster and more and bigger than it was, even though I never expected somebody to say, hey, would you come in and be full-time or run what we have, or whatever. Not at least initially. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's another network created, right, or something happens, or somebody were to leave, retire or quit or, whatever, then maybe I would think about I should get that call. But for now, so I did not want to retire because I loved working in this field,
mm-hmm.
right? And so that's why I started Standby Media, which was, my audio production for hire, and which I do sometimes when people need help with, getting a broadcast on the air and consulting and things of that nature. But the predominance of that company is to prepare announcers for air, young play-by-play announcers, athletes walking off the field, who want to get into the business, who know nothing about broadcasting, that kind of stuff. And, whether you're play-by-play or an analyst or a studio host or a sideline reporter or any of those things. I help with that. And that's very good because it kind of keeps me involved with all the sports. So doing that. And then 1 year to the day after I found out I was not going to be returning to Westwood One, Jim Gray called me and asked me if I'd be interested in coming to work at the Hall of Excellence. And then I had to go through interview process and all these other things. It wasn't like Jim handed me a job. Fontainebleau, where lovely hotel, wonderful hotel, very elegant, and first class and everything about it, has this museum in it, so I interviewed with them and then started there May 1st of last year. And so haven't had time really to think about anything else. Haven't looked for anything else since I started there because, I'm in my element with sports. The people there have been wonderful to me and great to work with and for. And, it's again, labor of love a little bit. So I'm not worried about it. If something were to come up down the line and somebody called me, obviously I'd take the call. You always listen, right?
Yeah,
it's like if you feel like selling your house. No, I don't want to sell my house. Somebody all of a sudden says to me, yeah, but I really want your house. I'll give you $2 million. Guess what? You're moving, right?
Yeah.
And so
it's kind of like the Jets with Sauce Gardner. It's like, we want Sauce Gardner. We're not trading him. He's too valuable. We'll give you two number ones.
Okay.
Oh, okay. We'll listen now.
Everybody has a price, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that. Like I said, I'm very happy, but you always take the phone call no matter what, right?
Yeah.
There's you never know, and so, but I don't foresee that the way radio and audio is right now. I just don't see that happening. But I've been wrong before, and so I'm not going to worry about it. Like I said, I've got my hands full making sure the museum is an unbelievable experience for anybody who walks in there, and doing our best to do that with both the audio and the video portion, and curating, all the best sports items and athletes that you can have in there. You mentioned, being the greatest. We have items from the greatest in all sports. We have Wayne Gretzky, we have Muhammad Ali, we've got Michael Jordan, Jim Brown, Tom Brady, whoever you want to say. We have Pele, we have Ronaldo, we have Messi, and so just lots of artifacts from all different athletes that were at the top of their professions. That's the Hall of Excellence, right? It's singular moments of excellence don't necessarily warrant getting you in this museum. It's sustained excellence for most cases. So it's a very, very cool place. We have a trophy room, trophies from all different sports, so you can see, what the fruits of the labor is of all the athletes that succeed and win.
Yeah, so you got the goats of the game there. Yeah, so you've pivoted successfully, and that's great. Some people pivot because they want to. Some people pivot because they're forced to. They have to. Now, before you pivoted, okay, let's talk about the process of pivoting, all right? Your contract's not renewed. You're 30, 60 days. You're not feeling yourself. Okay, what is the process? What are the emotions that you were going through from that time to the time where you successfully pivoted to the Hall of Excellence?
I'll say two things. I mean, I think I went through everything. I went through anger. I went through hate. I went through sadness. I went through mourning. I honestly, and I'm not trying to minimize a funeral by any stretch, but in essence, it was a funeral for my career. It was a funeral for what I did, because no matter what I did moving forward, even if I was working in broadcasting full time, doing whatever, it was not going to be what I had done. And so it was, and the reason I say that more, not to be morose or maudlin or anything like that, is that all the people that were saying nice things in social media posts or on interviews when they were being asked about me, it was like I was hearing my own eulogy. People said nice things about me, such nice things about me in that 30 to 60 days that they've never said to me in 30 years. And that's okay. We're all guilty of that, right?
Yeah.
How many
Sure.
people, when you lose a relative, you're like, oh, I wish I would have told them I love them more, or I wish I would have told them how important they were to me,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so that's what this was. It was, everything I was reading, I'll be honest, I mean, I got choked up. I cried a couple times. I read some of these wonderful things people were saying, and I was like, holy cow. And so it was to me the death of that person. But what many people called me to tell me, and I read about this and that, is that, unfortunately, most of us define who we are by our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt, like that was the death of a portion of me when really it was only the death of a job, right?
Right.
I was still the same person. I still had the same skill set. I still had the desire to work. I still had a lot to offer somebody, right? No matter what field it was.
Yeah.
And so you have to put past that. But I felt like I was watching my own funeral, because when the news broke publicly, which was about 2 weeks after I knew, maybe 3, it was, I mean, I was trending on Twitter, which is ridiculous. The producer should never, if a producer is trending anywhere in social media, it means you have like dead air during the broadcast, or you did something horribly wrong.
Yeah, something wrong. Yeah, or something
Something
bad
really
happened.
wrong,
Yeah.
right? I mean, literally trending for, I don't know, 8 minutes, whatever it was,
Yeah.
15 minutes, doesn't matter, right? But because it was within our industry, certainly the radio industry, never mind media, I mean, Richard Deitch of The Athletic wrote about it. Andrew Marchand wrote about it. And Sports Business Journal wrote about it. And Radio Inc. and all the top publications were, because it was a surprise and news, right?
Yeah.
Newsworthy in our field. And so, but like I said, it was just a matter of, I took the period to enjoy the accolades,
Mm-hmm.
even though they made me sad,
Yeah.
and put it in perspective. And then I had to, look, I'm not somebody to sit around anyway. I don't sit still very well.
Right.
Right. So after that, you got to pick yourself up and you got to figure it out, whatever it is. I was going to find a job. I didn't care if I was going to work in a restaurant. I was going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I had to find what the right fit was. And so I happened to find a few things, and here we are. But I get it. It's not easy. I mean, look, I've always felt that everybody has something that they do better than average, or in
Mm-hmm.
some cases better than most,
Yeah.
right? Tom Brady could throw a football better than most, right? And he could win better than most,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then there are people who play the piano better than average and can become a piano player. And even if you're not winning Grammys or you're not whatever, you can be very successful,
Yeah.
right? And so had to find, and I think anybody who's pivoting has to find what they're good at and what they can be and what they can excel at again,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's the tough part, is finding a fit. And then obviously there has to be an opening,
Yeah.
or you have to create your own company,
Yeah.
which I did as well. And so that's kind of where it is. But I was never sitting at home, even though I said use the word devastated. I was never sitting at home depressed, like my life is over, my career is over. I just, like, I wasn't going to sit there and eat a pint of chocolate ice cream and be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Although I probably ate the pint of chocolate ice cream anyway. But
That's not always a bad thing, though.
yeah,
Either.
right. No, I have a big sweet tooth, so I
Yeah,
did
me
eat
too.
a lot of that stuff. But you know what I mean? It's just I just that's just not my personality.
Yeah.
I'm very focused and very. Well, this won't surprise you because we know each other for a long time. But type A and just tunnel vision to the kind of what's next.
Yeah.
Like what do they say to a quarterback when he throws an interception?
Forget about it. Next play.
Next pass, next play, right? Pitcher gives up a home run, right? Batter strikes out. Forget about it. You can't change it. You can learn from it,
Right.
but you can't change it.
Yeah.
Move forward. Don't make the same mistake again, whatever it may be, right? Get better from it, and away you go. And so there's the sports analogy. It's perfect because I was in sports,
Yeah.
and it was just a matter of doing that.
Yeah, and you touched on a lot of things. I hope I don't get lost or forget. But
Sorry.
I know the part that you were talking about not letting your job define you. I think that would probably be kind of tough for you because you were always a sports guy. I mean, you've been a sports guy since you can remember. I mean, I know
My
in high
mother,
school you were the sports guy, and then you went to college, and so doing something that you enjoy, doing something that you love, and you stop doing it, I think that would be a lot tougher than for somebody who has a quote unquote job doing something that pays the bills, but it's not really a passion or a joy.
100% correct. And my mother tells me I used to walk around the house at 6 years old, pretending in a microphone and pretending to, announce the game.
Yeah,
And so
yeah, I did that too.
I knew that I wanted to do that from very young, right? And yeah, I mean, look, most people never get to do what they love.
Right.
My parents are divorced from the time I'm very young and generally never agreed on anything. I mean, they would argue that your shirt is not blue, just to argue sometimes, or so it seemed like as a kid, right? But I bring that up for one very simple thing. The only thing I remember them agreeing on was they both hated to go to work on Monday. And I had a conversation with my dad after a Mets game one day. We're at, I don't know, Burger King, McDonald's, or wherever we were. And I said to him, I said, if you hate going to work on Monday, why do you go? And he's like, well, wait a minute. Do you like your sneakers? Do you like your bicycle? How do you think we pay for all that stuff? And I said, no. I understand why you work. Totally understand that. Why do you work there if you don't like going to work on Monday morning? And he said to me, it's a great question. He goes, most people don't get the opportunity to do what they love. He goes, if you can find a job you love, I suppose it won't feel like going to work on Monday morning. He goes, and don't get me wrong, I don't hate my job, but I'd rather be doing anything else but be at the job. And for me, until I had children, and this is no offense to my wife, who we worked together for 25 years, there was no place I'd rather be than at work. And so it was different. It was very different. Because like I said, people used to say to me, Howard, wait, you have to work on Thanksgiving Day? You don't get to have turkey with your family? And I said, well, wait a minute. What do you do on Thanksgiving? Well, the family all gets together, we have turkey, and we watch the football game. I said, you know what I do? I said, I go and work the football game. I watch the same football game. I get paid to watch that football game. And then I go home and I have dinner with my family the next day, whatever. It's like, so I never thought of that as being unusual. And luckily my wife was very understanding with that. Because again, she was in the business and we met at CBS and everything. So, but it's just, I always remembered that conversation, and I couldn't tell you if I was 6, 8, or 10 years old or whatever I was, but it stuck with me that I had to find something that I wanted to do, that I wanted to be there. And, never once in the 35 years I was there did I ever think anything other than I have the greatest job.
Yeah, that's deep. It's something to remember.
And nobody, I know that maybe one person in your audience will feel the same way. Maybe. I'm very, very blessed in that respect. But like I said, I worked hard to maintain that. I worked hard to get there. I worked hard to keep that spot so that nobody else, I didn't turn down assignments because my fear was, that somebody else, they'd hire somebody else and they do a decent enough job that, all right, maybe they'd give them another assignment and I get one less. I worked a Major League Baseball game the night before my wedding. I worked the NFL draft the weekend of my wedding because I was afraid. It was the first draft they asked me to work. I was afraid that if I didn't work it, I'd never be asked again. And by the way, I just celebrated my 32nd anniversary yesterday.
How about that?
The same woman.
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry, yesterday, Thursday, on the night of the NFL draft. So now I didn't work the NFL draft this year, but there are many anniversaries I was at the NFL draft. Sometimes my wife would come with me. Sometimes she wouldn't. Our 10th wedding anniversary, we were supposed to have a date. I had somebody else lined up to cover the draft. I was just there at the beginning, make sure everything's okay. And then we were going to go have a date, go to dinner at the same place we had our first date and everything. And Peyton Manning got traded for Phillip Rivers at the draft because he got drafted by the Chargers, even though he told him, don't draft me, whatever. And all hell broke loose.
Eli Manning, yeah.
And I had to be there to help with that story. And so I, all of a sudden, was late for my own 10th anniversary date. So, again, very understanding wife and all that. But that's, live broadcasting. That stuff happens, right? So,
yeah. And you talked about gifts. Knowing what you're good at is very important in pivoting. And I know that's something that has helped you.
Yep.
And the other thing, because, we talked about things that people go through, you've gone through, and I think a lot of people can relate to the emotions of anger and depression and, wondering what could I have done better, etc. We also started in an era where jobs were pretty much guaranteed, right? You started work and, like 40 hours for 40 years, you get the pension, the gold watch, and all that has changed. But a lot of us, we still have that mentality when we lose our job. It's kind of like, this is not supposed to happen. And so that's another emotion that I think a lot of us still have, who are, about our age or maybe even a little older, a little younger. We kind of feel like we should keep our jobs forever. And so when you lose something that you feel like is guaranteed or something that you deserve, whether rightly or wrongly, it can have a big effect on what you do next because all those emotions that you mentioned get triggered. And it's tough to pivot when you have all those things going through your mind. So thank you for just being open about what you were going through.
Yeah, look, I'll say one thing to what you said quickly. I never felt that simply because I knew I was still at the top of my game, and I
Mm-hmm.
know it wasn't anything related to that. And so that's why it hurt more. Look, I mentioned as the executive producer, I hired and fired or didn't renew. I've only fired people for cause twice. I didn't renew people's contracts many times because they had slipped. I felt I had somebody better. All the same things an athlete would go through, right? I had budget concerns, whatever it was, those things happened. In this case, I know it was not job performance, so I'm happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, what was
You-
it?
right? No, but like, wait, if I'm still so good, why, right? But water under the bridge, it's their right to do it, just like it was my right to replace an announcer on Monday Night Football or whatever, whatever it was, or change out the analysts, the NCAA tournament one year. It's when you're in that position, you can do all those things, right? And I get it. I know it. Didn't like I said, didn't make it easier, but sometimes, there's a saying, it's sometimes it's better to make a change 1 year too soon than 1 year too late.
Yeah.
In this case, I would like to have thought I still had a few years left in me, but I wasn't expecting to have it forever. Forever was never, look, I would have loved to have it until they carried me out, I'm not going to say on a stretcher again, but I worked with some people who died in a press box, unfortunately.
Hmm.
And, I hate to say this, but there are worse ways that, if the guy was there doing a game and loving what he was doing, there are worse places or worse things that can happen. And so I would have done it as long as I could have, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I might have gotten tired of doing as many games because as travel gets harder and everything else and whatever. But I don't think I ever would have tired of doing events and would have stayed within reason, as long as I could have done it, whether it was there, by the way, or anywhere else. But I never, I don't think forever's promised. I don't think that's the right way to look at it. But yes, certainly loyalty is a very different word, not just in jobs, but in anything nowadays than it was when you and I were just entering the job field.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a much different world. So you've reinvented yourself. You are now the director of the Hall of Excellence. In the last few minutes here, why don't you tell us what you're doing there? I know you've shared a few things already about artifacts and things of that nature, but tell us what's been going on with you in the Hall of Excellence.
Yeah, so it's a one of a kind sports memorabilia museum. Although to be fair, we do have about 20 different entertainment artifacts as well. But it's basically like a mini version of Cooperstown and Canton and all the other halls of fame. We have over 300 artifacts, 30 different glass cases, displays, where we have like one case for baseball and one case for football and hockey and basketball and tennis and golf and Olympics and soccer and boxing, and then we have the trophy room and all these other things, and we're saluting excellence. right? And Jim Gray, the sportscaster, had about 40% of this museum, maybe even 45% in his house in LA. Wasn't a real collector per se, as the traditional sense of the word, but Jim did a lot of big broadcasts over the years and was friendly with Michael Jordan. So Michael gave him a jersey and autographed it. And Kobe Bryant gave him a pair of shoes and autographed it. And Muhammad Ali gave him something. And, along the way, he acquired this unbelievable collection of items that, he had in his house. It wasn't like he had a tour, or anything like that. But when I would visit him or anybody else, because Jim and I worked together at Westwood One for 18 years. I hired him, and then he was there prior to that. So we probably worked together for 25 years. And so when I would go to his house in LA, I would say, hey, tell me about this picture, or tell me about these gloves, or tell me about, what is this baseball bat here? Oh, that's the bat from Ken Griffey when blah, 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 blah. And so that's part of it. Tom Brady is part founder of the museum, and Tom has significant number of his items in there, including, I mentioned earlier, all 7 of his Super Bowl rings. His NFL draft card is in there. His NFL 100 jacket is in there. We have helmets and footballs, from historic moments, and so those are big attractions. And then, as I mentioned, from all the different sports, we're saluting excellence. And the common theme for all these athletes, is how they perform on the field, and the preparation and the dedication and the teamwork and all of those adjectives you can put to it to create success and excellence. By the way, that doesn't only apply to sports. It applies to the field you went into. It applies to being a dentist. It applies to being, no matter where you work, what are the most important things to be excellent at your vocation, right? Or how about being excellent at being a father? Right? Or being excellent at being a husband, being excellent at being a friend, right? It takes all those things. It takes effort. It takes time. It takes dedication.
Sure.
It takes empathy. All these things you have to do, teamwork sometimes, right? And diligence, determination, persistence. I come up with all, passion we talked about already, right? All of those things. So the museum is there to hopefully, as Tom put it, when we open the museum, to inspire others to greatness, to excellence in their life, in their fields of work. Vince Lombardi has a famous quote, great Hall of Fame Green Bay Packers coach, said something, I may mess this up by a word or two, but something along the lines of, gentlemen, we will strive for perfection. We will strive for perfection knowing it is unattainable. But if we strive for perfection along the way, we will catch excellence. And, that is really what this should be about, right? And so if any teenagers come in there, or, or young kids, or hell, it could be adults, right? And they see those messages and hear that, hopefully it makes them think twice. And if it doesn't for that, we just remember where we were when this significant moment in sports happened. When Tiger Woods won the Masters, or when Shohei Ohtani became the first 50-50 player in baseball history, right? And so we just go back there and you see it, and you see Simone Biles' leotard, all 8'8" of her, and you're like, wow, she was a world champion, and she's tiny. And then you see Michael Phelps, who's 6'5", and his Olympic jacket, you could fit 3 of her in there. And so you just, you remember those moments fondly. And so it's great. And like I said, there's an audio and a video tour. I mentioned some of the names earlier that are voicing the artifacts. Morgan Freeman has blessed us by giving us the introduction to the museum, the wrap-up to the museum, and an overview of each case that we have in there.
Goodness
and then
gracious.
The individual artifacts are voiced by, like I said, some of the legendary sports announcers of all time. Jim Nantz and Bob Costas and Marv Albert and Jim Gray and Doc Emmerich and Andres Cantor and Mary Carrillo. And Tom Brady narrates a lot of his own items as well, explaining the significance to him and why those items are there and the significance of the actual item. And so it's a really great experience for anybody who is a sports fan. As somebody who spent my entire life in sports, as working, but never mind the fact that I used to take, pilgrimages to Cooperstown anyway when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I walked in there and I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. Even though some people might think I'd be jaded from some of that. I was at all 10 of Tom's Super Bowls. Okay. I produced the radio broadcast for all 10 of his Super Bowls. The 71, the 3 he didn't win. That still doesn't mean I look at the ring that he won with Tampa Bay, the 7th one that has 319 diamonds and it unscrews and inside is a replica of Raymond James Stadium. I don't look at it and go, wow, that's incredible, right? That's an incredible ring, but it's an incredible achievement when nobody else that had played in, more than 6 Super Bowls, he was in 10 and won 7, right? And so you marvel at some of these things and you respect what it took to get him to that spot. Immensely, right? And you look at all the other ones that maybe I wasn't at. Same thing, you hold in high regard all those, and it's very, very uplifting when you walk in there every day. And so part of my job is that audio and that video tour, which obviously, as we've talked already, is part of my background. Is so it's writing the scripts now for any artifacts we have coming in, and then getting it to be voiced by somebody that makes sense. We got an entry badge for the first ever Masters from 1934. I can write a script for that all day, but if Jim Nance isn't the one who reads, this started the tradition unlike any other in 1934, it doesn't sound the same.
There you go.
There's no knock on any other announcer.
And
right?
You get the music in the background too, right? It
should sound like Jim, right? I mean, it should be Jim. It doesn't sound right otherwise. So you got to get that voiced, and Jim was kind enough to do it, right? And then you have to get a story behind it, and then there's video behind it, and everything else, so you can see, something from that moment in time, if you will. And so that part, and then I'm part curator, and I'm part tour guide, and I'm part operations, and part, we're open for private events. People can rent out the space, and and so it's all those things kind of rolled into one. Publicity for it, such as talking about it on podcasts, and it's great, and it's great, and it's in Las Vegas, and it's family friendly, and it's in the Fontainebleau Hotel, and I can't say enough good things about it. Like I said, even as a sports fan who's seen so much, it's really amazing, and you can spend anywhere from an hour to 5 hours in there. So.
Oh yeah, it's great for a sports guy. I mean, you've already sold me on it. It gives
Come on, visit. Come on.
Gives you just another reason to go to Vegas.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and you've talked about relationships in what you mentioned. Just getting, just to hear Morgan Freeman's voice saying anything. I mean, sports or anything. That's an amazing
on the cereal box.
catch. Huh?
Right, I'd listen and read the ingredients on the cereal box.
Yeah,
seriously, and I'd enjoy it.
Yeah, he has that voice that just transcends anything.
I have no idea what lecithin is or yellow number 5 or whatever, but I don't care if he says it. It sounds good, right?
B40, something like that. Yeah, if he says it, it's good. So relationships are an important part. I mean, you talked about all the people that you've touched over the years, have touched you. And being able to pivot into this area, which is similar to what you have been doing, because it's sports related. I mean, obviously, it's not the same job.
Yes, I could not go be a director at the Museum of Natural History. That would not work.
Right. Or the Museum of Jewish Heritage, where I worked for a little while.
Yeah, that's fair too. Even though I have Jewish heritage, that's fair.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day. So in closing, we've talked about a lot, and again, thank you for your time, for all you shared, and we've got a lot to catch up on. It's been 30, 40 years, who's counting, but we'll catch up on some other stuff another time. So I know relationships are important in terms of pivoting. Doing something that you love is very helpful. Not everybody gets to do that, but it'd be great if you can. What are some tips that you have for those who are having a tough time and feel that they may need to reinvent themselves the way you have?
It's a great question. I'm going to tell you, so over the years, whenever young announcers or students of broadcasting would call me, and they would say to me, hey, what's the best way to get a job? What's the best way? And I would say to them, look, I can help you with anything. I can answer anything you want. The one thing I can't tell you is how to get another job. I got the one job out of college. I mean, literally, I mentioned it earlier, right? 7 days before I was graduating, I interviewed for the job and got it. And that was before the internet, and that was before cell phones, and that was before, just getting the appointment for the interview was like back and forth 10 times. I wasn't home. They called me. I called them. It was crazy. And so, And then I never looked for another job for 35 years. And then, to be fair, I started my own company.
Mm-hmm.
And the job at the Hall of Excellence came about because Jim Gray had worked with me and then asked me if I'd be interested in applying for the job. And so I applied. Now, Jim didn't, wasn't Jim giving me a job, hey, come do this. But the fact is, I didn't have to look for a job. So I am probably the worst person to tell people how to get another job because I've not looked for, when I first found out from Westwood One for a couple of months, yes, I did put out resumes. I went on LinkedIn. I did all the things that everybody else now does for jobs. But I would just say this, look, at some point, if the Museum of the Hall of Excellence had not come about, I would have probably had to find some other job doing something else to help pay the rent a little bit, or the gas in California where I'm living. And so
you need two jobs to pay for gas.
I moved to Las Vegas for the museum, yeah, but I would say, look, I still think, what are you good at, right? What are you good at? Not everybody is good at everything, right? I'm tone deaf musically. So I couldn't, although I was a DJ at one point back in the day, but I could not go, even though I know how to produce, I could not be a music producer, right? I just couldn't. And so I can't play the piano. There's a lot of things I can do. My vision is terrible, right? Being an eye doctor, probably not a good idea. And obviously not going to pivot to be an eye doctor at age 50 something, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So what are you good at? What are your talents? What are your strengths? So everybody has strengths at something. Find that. And hopefully part of the reason people are strong at something or good at something is because they like it, right? Why do people get good at golf? Why do people get good at playing the piano? Because they enjoy it. They do it more. It's repetition. It's doing stuff, right? So whatever it is you're good at, like I was good at numbers, you were good at numbers, right? So I would have probably tried to figure out something along with numbers if this other thing didn't come out, and whether that was becoming a statistician or, or doing something, I don't know, accounting. I'm not sure what I could have done at that late stage. But I would have looked for something in a field that I thought I would enjoy and that I would be good at, right? But those are more jobs than careers, right? At that point. And look, I like to work, but I don't want to work until I'm 80. And so at this point, I got probably another 10, 15 years, I hope. And then we'll go from there. But yeah, I don't know that I have advice other than find something you like or you're good at and try and find something with that, because, that's, if you're better at that, strong at that, then you have a chance over other candidates. But again, if you're passionate about it, then you have a much better, chance altogether. Although now, obviously, there are a lot more jobs than ever existed before. You could have become a social media influencer, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of those.
But you're trying now.
Yeah, a lot of those out there. And I think relationships, I think you touched on it, just your relationships with these other people. Because the funny thing about knowing what you're good at, a lot of times we don't know what we're good at because we've been good at it for so long. So I think relationships are important because those people can help you to see where you're good at, what you're good at, because, a lot of times you don't realize it. So especially in today's market, I think relationships are very important. And as you've shown evidence that relationships have gotten you to where you are. And, I'm looking forward to hearing more about, the Hall of Excellence, things that you're going to do in the future, because, you've always been a man who's figured it out. I enjoy talking.
It's a bottom line business, right? The media business, show must go on.
Yeah.
Right. So look, I was at the Super Bowl where the lights went out, right? Producing that broadcast. You don't go off the air. You've got to stay on the air and you've got to figure it out and you've got to talk. And, Westwood One did the broadcast when DeMar Hamlin collapsed.
Yeah.
And, CBS Radio Sports, my third World Series game, there was an earthquake in San Francisco. Yeah. Show must go on, right? So you can't sit there and you have to do something, right? Yeah. You have to do something. So that's kind of a good lesson for it also. But yes, relationships are very important because Jim called me. And a lot of the announcers that I hired along the way at Westwood One, if you go to standbymedia.net, my website, you'll see a lot of them who said such nice things, but they're the ones that encouraged me to coach others to make them better, because I gave them feedback and helped them ascend the broadcasting ladder, if you will. And from Kevin Kugler to Brandon Gaudin to John Sadak to whomever it was, Jason Benetti, Ian Eagle, all these guys that I was fortunate enough to work with when they were very young, and they felt I helped them. So I'm still helping others now. It's just in a different way, but it's out of necessity, but it's also out of love, right? Like I said, I don't have to do this. I'm good at it, and I want to do this, right? And so, and I'm fortunate enough that I could pivot to this position. Not everybody can just do that as seamlessly, if you will, but I understand that. And but I also believe you make your own, I say make your own bed. That's a bad way to put it. But the only thing you can control is your effort, right? And so it's kind of the way I subscribe to things all along. And that's now, I've pushed my effort in another path. Just like, anybody else you're going to be talking to on this podcast, and anybody else probably listening who's in a similar boat. I mean, yes, it was a terrible moment in my career, but if that's the worst thing that ever happens to me in my life, I've had a pretty charmed life.
Yeah, like you say, the show must go on. And so, again, thank you for being a guest. We hadn't spoken in about 30 years. I know we talked a few times on the phone, and we definitely have even more to catch up on. So definitely look forward to that. So stay in touch. Again, thanks for being a guest on Create Your New Normal. Thanks for everything you've shared.
My pleasure. Thanks, Anthony. Great to see you. Great to talk to you again. Let's not wait another 30 years.
Oh, no, we won't. All right, you got it. So my guest today is Howard Deneroff, the president and founder of Standby Media, LLC, and also the director of the Hall of Excellence. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Create Your New Normal. And don't forget to listen, like, share, subscribe, rate, and review this show on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. And for more information on how to create your new normal, visit createyournewnormal.com, where you can learn how to reinvent yourself on your terms, not someone else's. That's createyournewnormal.com. Well, that's all for now. And until next time, I'm your host, Anthony Quinones, inspiring you to create your new normal. Take care and God bless.